And 3, 2, 1, and we're live.
I believe when you're budgeting for the city, and I know we're probably going to talk a little more about this, but that all the basics need to be covered. So you have to have good roads and good infrastructure, and you want to deal with all the things that could become a problem. Like, it's just like when you're doing a budget for home, you make sure there's food on your table, a roof over your head. You have to cover those things. But when there is a bit of, when it comes to the discretionary spending or what you're working towards, I'm always fighting for the arts. And, the resident council laughs at me, and yet they laugh at me just because I'm such a loudmouth. But but honestly, they also agree that these things are good too, right? But that's where the sort of the pushing and shoving starts with the different interests on council. Like, you have we have such a great council that we have business people and farmers, and so we definitely represent the whole community really equally, and I'm probably sort of the weird anomaly that's come from the city, who's traveled around the world, who's enjoyed art in countries all over the world, and so I'm constantly badgering them for more money, and I actually got some this time, so that's really exciting. What was the question? I forgot now.
I want to get into the budget part of things, but I also want to give you a lot of credit because I was listening to a city council meeting and you were talking about the upcoming budget, and people were allowed to write in their surveys and the responses, and you were really pushing, like, are we going to get this out on social media? How are we going to do this? And it was just like, well, I'm so grateful that you're saying these things because I didn't know that. And if I hadn't have watched this video, I wouldn't have known that there was an upcoming budget meeting.
Yeah.
And so I went and I tried to do it. I did do it, but it was so difficult because it gives you like $500 and it asks you to try and figure out where to put the money.
Where would you spend your money?
Yes. If I can spend it however I like, how would I like it set up? And it was just like, oh no, like I don't know how to, I set all of it up. And then I was like, I spent my $500 like too quickly. Now I have to go back in and try to re-edit everything. And
I'm not going to be eating for a while, but
exactly, because there's so many different issues that jump to your mind, and you're like, oh, I need to spend $500 on this one issue, and then you're like, well, you can't do that. You have to do a balanced approach, and I think that would be so valuable if everyone in the community had to go through that, because then you start to realize that. Well, you can't just not do new infrastructure. You can't just leave all your roads to fall apart focus on just one thing. And so what is that like for you to have to sit down and prioritize so many important issues? And it's like none of them deserve to be thrown aside and say, don't bother.
I think one of the things that makes being a city councillor so much easier, and particularly in Chilliwack, is that we have an amazing team at City Hall. And so they all have their areas that they're responsible for. And when it comes to objectives and measures, which is what we call it, what we need to focus on in the city, they all come with presentations on, how are our roads doing? What equipment do we need to replace? How are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? And they all have their areas of expertise, and they make council aware of what we need. And they're very, very frugal, because we are, first of all, as a city, we have no debt. We're one of the very few cities that if any other cities, we don't have any debt. And that's the way we save and spend. So they don't ask for anything that's not really essential. And so they make us really aware. And then there's other things that we may want to see, like, when we see all those, right? And we know, okay, all that stuff needs to be covered. And, I dare them to try and come to the table with something that's not absolutely essential, because, one of us will say, well, what do you need that truck for? Or, can't we get a few more years out of this one? And, and stuff like that. So, but they're so good. Like, they are so good, and they care about the city so much. And then there's a certain amount that's sort of discretionary funding. So do we want to build another sports field? And and that's where sort of the wrestling comes in. But as far as, the fundamental stuff, the city staff really, they do all the work. and say, this is how much money we're going to need for this. And they go out to competitive bids and they do all this stuff to make sure that, we're getting the best possible deal and the best kind of asphalt that's going to last the longest, and what kind of paint you put on bike lanes, and, all of this kind of stuff. And they price check, and they're pretty awesome. They make us look smart. I love that.
That is so cool, because we don't ever think of that when we're driving through the community. When we see a new road built, we're like, oh, good, a new road, but we don't think about what quality of paint are they using, how long is it going to last, and that's where someone's really taking care of us and never really gets that recognition.
It's like those little nubby road divider things, those reflector things.
Yeah.
Do you know that every time they clear snow, they all get snapped off?
I did not know that.
So there's other kinds that you can put that go under, like
downwards, right?
Yeah, they go into a little scoop and they sit in there, but they're like 10 times more expensive. So we always are, and we put in new roads, and we'll put in a certain amount of those kind, but they're expensive. And so we never really do it all in those, or, we would never replace them all in those because it's too expensive. But over time, we move a little bit more and they last almost forever. But, they're so crazy expensive, and those other little reflector ones. So you really have to balance off. And this is the thing that our public works, Glenn McPherson, is brilliant. Like, he knows, these ones will last this many years, and we'll get a certain amount of those because they're better, but they're super expensive. So then we'll get these other ones, and they get scraped off every year, but then the crews go around, and how much does it cost us to stick them all back down again after the winter season is over? And, things like that. Like, we don't even have to think about that. They make sure we know it. Yeah. But
exactly. I think, and that's so important, because that's what brings us together as a community, is recognizing that people care about making sure you're safe, because those things go towards safety. They make sure we know where the road is in those circumstances. It's not a trivial, nonsensical, like, who cares type of issue. It's how can we keep our community safe? How can we safeguard? I've seen so many new protections on near school zones, and more boldly lit. And so what has that been like to know that your community's safer because of this?
Well, it's good. Like, those things, those crosswalk things that have kind of like, they have, I don't know, reflector things, but anyways, when they push them, they like flash all the way across, and they're the new kind of save everyone thing. So we're trying to put as many of those in as possible. So now that's one thing that we do, is we sit there and sort of say, okay, what areas have the most blind crossings, the worst areas or whatever, put them in there first. And then, safety, obviously, the basics are always going to be the most important things. And then we plan for projects, but it takes us a few years to save for them. And a lot of times, like with the provincial government or the federal government, they have grant money available, but you have to have your part put away. So we will say, okay, we want to build a new library, which we did in Sardis, right? And I was on board then. Want to build a new library. So then you start packing away that money to build the new library, and people are naturally impatient. The people in the community, we want our own library. And, they think we're doing nothing, but we're putting the money away. And then we wait for a grant, a literacy grant or whatever, to come from the province or the federal government. And they'll say, well, we'll pay a third. The province will pay a third. And where's your third? And if you don't have your third, you're out of luck.
Yeah.
So we have to make sure that we always have that money put away. And, a lot of communities have borrowed, and, that over time. And so, I know when I was in my 20s, I was just like a complete spendaholic. I loved, I had all these different areas of income and things I wanted to buy. But then, eventually you get yourself in debt. And then you spend all your time just trying to make your minimum payments on your credit cards and this, that, and the other thing. And, it's the same thing for local government. If you don't owe any money, you don't waste any of the tax dollars servicing your debt. And so you can do more things. Like, I look at, that's why we're not as much in trouble. We're not in trouble, but obviously during COVID, things have gone down. Revenues are down. We've given, the community lots of breaks as far as paying their taxes late and, utility things and stuff like that. And we've been able to do that because we don't have that debt. We're in areas other areas where, you have a mayor complaining that the government didn't give them nearly enough money, and now they're going to have to raise their taxes to maybe 12 or 13%. We won't mention any names, but they have huge debt. And that's, so a huge portion of what the taxpayers are paying goes towards servicing those debts. And so obviously they can't do as much, except for buy chairs.
Well, and I think that that's true, especially in Canada right now, because I think they were talking about reducing our credit rating, and those things have impact on the communities. And I think that it's important to raise that awareness, because a lot of people in it was the last election, I think raising taxes and lowering taxes was a big conversation for the community. And there were people who wanted to run for mayor who wanted to raise taxes, and others who didn't. And that played a huge role in the conversation. I had people saying, well, I don't want my taxes up. And it was like, this is so interesting, because it's a point of contact and discussion that seems to be important to the community just as much as council. And that's so important that we're all on the same page about how do we manage our spending, how do we do it responsibly. And it's so nice to be able to come on and say, like, we're not in this circumstance, we didn't have to do outrageous amounts of debt and go through those processes. So the other part I wanted to ask about, just while we were talking about the cultural center, is that whole area is just set up for community and for everyone. Like, you can go for a run all the way around. You have the Chilliwack Coliseum, you have the Cultural Centre, you have the Landing Leisure Centre, you have the Curling Club, you have the Evergreen Hall, all on one city block.
And we're going to have something new. I mean, we have something new we're working on right now that's actually being built. It's called a pump track.
Okay.
And it is the biggest pump track apparently in North America. I don't know how that happened, but, because we don't have a huge amount of space there. But a pump track is something that they use for, like, bike course type things. You can tell how much I know about this because, I'm not very athletic. I'm very uncoordinated. But anyways, it's this pump track thing. And they're talking about possibly there'll be international or national competitions coming here just to use that pump track. That's one more thing that's being added there now and is well under construction. And it's for bikes sort of, and it goes up and down, and it's got all sorts of cool corners, and it's very engineered beautifully. And so that's being added to that area. That area, at one time it was the exhibition park, right? And it was so sad for so many people who had, used that area for so many years. And then it was kind of with the Red Barn. Oh, I'm losing my mind now. Heritage Park.
Yes.
It was all moved there, right? And so a lot of those kind of things went there that would have originally, but the master plan for that area has turned into such a great kind of recreational, as you say. There's so many different things you can do there, and you will continue to see that area grow and be enhanced. The other thing that is really boring but very expensive is that we're paving the whole thing eventually. I can't remember whether it's going to be this year or whatever, but trying to pave it all so that there's lots of parking for people in that area because, gravel parking lots are hard on the community. They're hard on the road system, all the rest of it, because people bring that out onto the road. So that area all has to be paved. And it's been sort of a line item that has been there, and sometimes it's been bumped and then it's been brought back. And I can't remember exactly which year we're doing it in now, but I mean, just paving that parking lot is like astronomically expensive.
Yeah.
But you have, that's one of those boring things you have to plan for.
Yeah.
And it'll make a big difference to the community. It's just like Spadina right now is also being beautified, and there's going to be planter gardens and stuff down the middle, and better parking and better traffic flow throughout there. It's all to enhance that area, to make it better for the residents who live on that street, and also for the people that are visiting the curling center, the Landing Sports Center. There's pickleball that goes on in the Landing Sports Center like constantly, and that at some point needs all to be resurfaced, because right now it's cement, and it's got to be. And pickleball is a huge thing in Chilliwack now, so we're trying to accommodate everyone, just like the arts and everything else. You want to accommodate everyone's interests, and so it's it's got to have that sort of bouncy floor in it. Right now it's cement. I wouldn't want to be playing on cement. Like, what if you fall? You could crack a knee or whatever. But anyways, yeah. So, you know,
I think it's so important because when you're going there, it's so cool that you can take your kid to swimming lessons and then maybe take them to curling, or take them from swimming lessons to go and do art, or have your son go and play hockey, and then have like all of these different activities that you can do. There's a skate park, and that's where I think that the community is going to be pulled so much, is because there's so much to do there, and it's all a one stop. It doesn't feel like the arts are in their own category where you have to drive somewhere obscure to go and do art. It's right in there with hockey, and it has that equal leveling, which I think, to your point of trying to raise the understanding of the cultural center and the value of the arts, is happening when you can have all of those things together. And I think downtown is going through a huge revitalization right now. So can we talk about that and what that's been like to watch for you? Because you started in 2008 in a very bleak time in our economy, and now we're here.
Yeah, we had that one building on the corner, and I've forgotten what it was called now, which is terrible. I have the worst memory, but it's not that I don't care about this stuff, but I forget
the Empress Hotel?
No, it was the Empress Hotel, but then there was also that building that was on the corner, and it started, I think, with an H. But anyway, and it was all boarded up, and the Empress Hotel had all sorts of issues with, leaking grossness, and it was falling down, and I think at one point when I looked at the Empress Hotel, I thought, oh, I wish we could take that beautiful building and just kind of, and the Paramount, I know you were involved with that. So I mean, there's the revitalization of that area. It was a difficult one for council. When I started in 2008, we, the area was really starting to fall into disrepair. And, we didn't have the homeless issue that we have now. That sort of has come over time. But at that particular time, it was just the fact that most of the business and that sort of thing had moved to Sardist, or, they were moving out to Eagle Landing. I'm not sure whether Eagle Landing was there at that point or not, but, it was it's sort of the excitement had fallen away from the downtown. And we have a beautiful downtown, but it also needed something. So, there was consultants that were brought in. I think at one point, John Jansen wanted a Dutch village down there. That was the concept, or it was going to be this, that, or the other thing. And, there was so many, we all read a book called The Tipping Point. And, I'm not much of a reader. I read for education only. I actually hate reading. And that was part of the reason probably I hated school, because I really didn't like reading or math. So, that was a problem. But anyways, and that, the basic premise was that, you get to a point, you fix the little things, you get to a point where you have to do sort of a major thing that will tip it in the right direction. So what is that thing? What are we going to put all this money into that's going to make that kind of a difference? So, what ended up happening is we bought up all of those properties downtown. We bought them from local people or people that weren't around anymore. And basically, or I don't think we had to expropriate anything in that area, but, we bought all those properties, and it was, and we put them together as one block. And then we put it out to a developer thinking, okay, now we have millions of dollars invested in this to try and, but it's more of it's not a real estate fund, it's a social fund. You're thinking about it from that perspective, that, you want to improve that area. How are you going to make it? How are you going to hit the tipping point?
Yeah.
So we spent all this money, bought all the properties, and then we put it out to tender. And there was some very interesting concepts that came back. And we, at the end of the day, we picked the Alger brothers because I think they really showed to us that they respected the historic presence of the downtown, and they really wanted to recreate that. So when they couldn't save it, what they were going to replace it with was going to be a nod to the original buildings and the original feel of the downtown and all the rest of it. And we voted, and it was tough going. It wasn't unanimous. People, we all sort of thought, well, I think this would really revitalize the area. And I would really, and at the end of the day, we ended up picking the Alger brothers. And I think they've done an amazing job. And I think it will help us deal with some of the social issues down there. But bearing in mind that, you move them out of the downtown core, you move the people who are struggling. It doesn't mean they go away. It just means they're not in that area, right? And social issues are really the responsibility of the provincial government. And over the last few years, with an incredibly strong team at City Hall, Karen Stanton, she and Mike, what's his last name? I've forgotten. Anyways, that's not, I just want to give him some credit. But anyways, I forgot what his last name is. Anyway, they have worked very hard to get us on the radar of the provincial government to say, hey, we have a real big problem here, because we weren't even listed as one of the cities that were in jeopardy with, homelessness issues and all the rest of it. We were not, and now we are. And now we're getting funding. And now we're getting places for these people to live and be helped, to have the wraparound services and things for them. One of the reasons why I think all of the municipalities have come up against dealing with so many social issues is that they closed Riverview. And at Riverview had some horrible human rights kind of violations, from what I understand. It was sort of before my time, but people were treated badly there. And it was almost like, the One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest kind of asylum-y kind of place. And instead of making improvements and improving the lives and the care and all of those things, they just closed it. And they pushed all the people that were suffering out into the communities. And, at the time they were probably on a medication regime and they were doing well and all the rest of it. And all of those things sort of fell away. And these people then migrated to the streets because they're not being medicated. They're not being helped. They're kind of left to fend for themselves and pushed it out to the cities. And then, as we have people with mental illness and addiction issues increasing, there's also nowhere to send them. So it's become the problem of every city. And, Chilliwack is not alone in that. And so I think, that if we could go back to the type of system where we actually did have a Riverview, where people could, with really severe mental illness issues, could go and people could work with them, and then they put them into like group home kind of, once they got them stabilized and all the rest of it. Like, you shouldn't feel like if you go there, you're there forever. They could put them into group homes and they could be monitored and make sure they're taking their medication so that they could live happy lives. Like, every human being wants to be happy and feel normal. When you don't feel normal, it's hard to make good decisions, and you end up on, in a lot of cases, these people end up on the streets and they're just not getting the supports that they need. So anyway, the social issues are always going to be there. I think that we need a really strong focus on managing it better. And I think certainly Ken and City Council have made great strides in that, but it's really hard to know what will work. What's the best thing to do?
I completely agree. And I think that this also goes back to 2008, because we had a recession. And I don't think a lot of us realize that is part of the reason that housing prices went so high after the fact, that we paid so many consequences that we don't really put it at the foot of such a big financial impact that caused a lot of people. I remember my mom worked at Creekside at one point in time, and the people upstairs were struggling with addictions, but they were able to do it in this like 150 square foot, 200, like not a very big place, but they had a place where their social assistance checks would be able to pay for them to live in this small little nook and cranny area.
To be warm.
to feel that they were in
And
their
dry.
own home.
Yeah.
And that when 2008 hit, all of that went away. Now these prices are going up, and those people can't afford to live there anymore, and they're pushed onto the streets. And then when I was working as a native court worker, it didn't feel like the issue was like a lack of housing, which I do think is absolutely a factor. It was that they didn't want to leave anyone behind, and they've developed their own culture on the streets of like, my closest friend is like Nick, and I would never leave Nick under any circumstances ever. And it's like, okay, well, how do I get you housing if you don't want to leave this person? And it's like, now I have to try and find a group place where you can both be together, and that limits the options. And people don't want to abandon their friends and family when they're on the streets as well. And so we run into these issues of like, I could never convince someone to abandon their comrade on the streets because it is this mindset of like, we're surviving this together. And that's stronger than me coming in and saying, oh, I have this solution and you can just move out to Promontory and we have like a nice treatment bed for you and it'll all be easy peasy. Like, they don't want to leave that person behind. And so we run into these types of issues. And I'm grateful that I've heard experts talk from FVRD, and they get it. They see that we're up against very complex social issues, and that's so important and so inspiring, because people will read the newspaper and get very frustrated that this isn't a fixed problem. And it's like, but we have the best minds who understand the nuances of the issue. And I think that that's so valuable. So can we talk a little bit more about what it's like to be a city councillor and what it's like to run? Because that must have been such a big moment to decide to run in 2008.
It was. At the time, I was working as the CEO of the Chamber of Commerce in a job that I loved, I have to say. But it's like anything, once you're in a job like that, you become more aware of your city, and you become more aware of the things that you would like to, the input that you'd like towards change and improvement, especially when you love your city. Like, I love Chilliwack, and I thought, there will never be a better time than now, because I am armed with information and knowledge that I never had before that. Because honestly, you go about your day-to-day life, and if you're not working in a kind of an environment where you're getting that information. And I was also writing articles for the Progress and the Times about business, and so my name was out there. I was involved. I had a lot of clients from TELUS, our BC Tel days, that were in, and so they knew my names. There was a lot of business people from there. I was also the president of the Rotary Club, the Chilliwack Mount Cheam Rotary Club at the time, 2007 to 2008. So I was, people knew my name from that. And I thought, a big part of being elected is name recognition. And if you want to do this for the right reasons. Like, I always talk to people when they come to me and they say, I'm thinking about running for council. And I say to them, well, why? Why do you want to run for council? Well, I want to be an MLA someday, or I want to do this someday. And those things are all, valid. But I think the most important thing is that you really want to make a difference in your community, and you love it here. And it is, people think that the job is all about glory and all the rest of it. The best city councillors that I've ever worked with are people that listen more than they talk. Like, I get criticized for that because I don't talk that much at city council meetings. But if somebody's already asked a question, or I've already heard what I need, or, I don't have any questions, I'm not going to just talk for the happiness of hearing my own voice. And I think that you have to kind of check your ego. Like, is it about your ego? Is it going to make you feel good to be, a city councillor? Because I'm going to tell you, it's not always nice. Like, it's not nice to be a city councillor. But anyway, so that's, at that point, I decided to run because I thought, well, maybe I would have a chance. And then you go through all candidates debates and things like that. And you realize how little you do know, first of all. You become very insecure because you think, oh my gosh, I didn't know that, or I didn't know this. And it's humbling. And then you go to the election night and you think, at the first one, it was like, oh, well, if I don't get in, I gave it a good try and all the rest of it. And I did. And I was like really shocked because I didn't really 100% expect to get in. And, and I still have huge insecurities left from being bullied and, not having a very supportive mother at times and all the rest of it. And so insecurity is a big part of who I am. Like, I can be really brave out there and I'm kind of mouthy, but honestly, I was insecure about it. And I was so excited. And then you get into the job and you they always say, you don't know what you don't know. And really, I didn't know a lot. Like, and so the first year is a big learning curve. But as I say, if you're doing it for the right reasons, you'll put in your time, you keep your mouth shut a little bit and try and just understand. Seek to understand is the most important thing. And nowadays, like the last few elections, so how many elections have I been through? At the end of this will be 14 years, but the first 2 terms, I think, were 3 years, and then 4 and 4. So that's 4 elections I've been through. And the last one was particularly difficult, I think, because of social media. And probably the last couple of terms have been way more difficult because of social media. I think social media is an amazing tool to get information out there. I use it a lot for the Hospice Society. I use it a lot as a city councillor. I think it's probably one of the biggest services I give the community, is to make them aware of what their opportunities are for feedback, or what's going on. We're having a hazardous waste thing, whatever. Like, all the services that we provide are useless unless people know about them. So I think from that perspective, it's a very, very powerful tool. But for me, it's the trolls. It's the people that get behind their keyboard and say they're doing nothing, when I know for the last 6 years we've been fighting for dollars, or we've been fighting for this or this, that, and the other thing. They're so stupid. They're so, just, they're doing this for political reasons. They're, after this person, when it is just absolute baloney. Like, I don't think there's any of us. I mean, over time, I've worked with some really horrible city councillors, and I've worked with some good ones. And for the most part, I think people do it for the right reasons. They care about their community. They do it with honesty and integrity and try and work super, super hard because they care. And so it hurts my feelings when people say mean things about me. and most people say, oh, well, it's just water off a duck's back or whatever.
Or you signed up for this is the one you get a lot, which I completely disagree with, because you're like...
I signed up to work for you. Yes. I didn't sign up to be... Yeah, but sorry, I interrupted
No
you.
worries. I wanted to say that you have so much connections to the community, even if you removed the title of city councillor, that for anyone to question your decisions in that way is just... It's kind of silly, because you have so many important ties to the community. You are fighting for the right things. And I think that that's the case with a lot of city councillors. But you have a special resume of like, I've been out there, I've been giving my free time because I care.
Yeah.
And so for someone to turn around and question you, or to leave those comments, it's like, that's not even fair if you look at her resume. Because when I looked at it, it was just like, wow, there is a lot on here. She's just giving her time because she cares. And some city councillors are there for the right reasons, but they still don't have that volunteer background that shows that they are willing to just work for free. And that's where you can clearly see your passion. So please go on.
Well, yeah. And I think that it's really counterproductive for a community. And there's a lot of people that are not going into politics. There's a lot of people who are leaving politics, who are there for the right reasons and doing really great things because they just can't handle it anymore. I can't, and I've been somewhat lucky because I'm not overly controversial in any way. I'm pretty liberal in the way that I view our community and the world. I'm certainly well-traveled, and I understand that every single human being brings their gift to this. And, it's unfair for people to be judgy and all the rest of it. So yeah, it hurts my feelings. It's made me cry many times, and I think to myself, well, stop, that's so stupid. Like, don't be like that. Everybody's entitled to opinion. And I 100% agree with that. I want to know what the community thinks. Probably the hardest thing about being a councillor right now is not being able to have people at meetings, because that input matters to me. But just be nice about it. Like, say to me, instead of saying, I think you're stupid and useless, and what the hell does she do anyway? And just say, I don't understand why we haven't been able to solve this. Or when you made this decision about this thing, can you explain to me what went into that decision so I can try and understand why you made that decision that way? Be respectful, as I would be respectful towards you. And, I try so hard not to bite when it's out there, not to respond, not to engage in disrespectful conversations. If you want to come at me in a respectful way, I am there for you all day. But the moment that happens, I just shut right off. And I don't think there's too many people that don't. You go into fight or flight. Well, I will choose flight every time when I know I'm dealing with someone who is not going to be reasonable.
Yeah. And that totally makes sense. I think that that's where we run into issues of discouraging people to want to run and lead our community.
Yeah.
And it's this lack of knowledge and entitlement that there's some sort of issue, and they're kind of grandstanding at you, telling you, well, if we just fix this problem, the whole world, like fixing the homeless issue is a serious issue. And I don't think anybody's on the other side of it.
Yeah.
But people will regularly say like, well, nobody's doing anything about it. And it's like, you don't understand how complex these issues are. And if I sat you down and walked you through, well, we could do this, but there's 4 consequences to it, and we could do this, but there's these problems that arise, and
will this work, and is this what they want? And you have to understand that there's free will involved. And there are laws that protect people from being forced to do things they don't want to do. And addiction is an illness and a disease, and it's challenging. But on the other hand, when you get a win, it's thrilling. When you make the right decision and it seems to be working, and people are thriving. Wow, what a great feeling that is. And I think that's part of it. That keeps you going.
Absolutely. And I think that it's so nice to look at City Council and see all of these fantastic stories, because each one of you have come from different places.
Totally different places.
Accomplished different things and have done it in your own ways, where you can clearly see the passion that's behind it. And I think the development of our community is a real testament to the work you guys are doing and the city staff are doing, because it does things just get better in the community, and we just all take that for granted, like how well our parks and how well Vetter Road, the trails are looking. We just all take it for granted and go, oh, this looks great, like perfect. And we don't give credit to you guys.
Well, and on the flip side of that, we screw up. We've made lots of stupid decisions for the right reasons, but things that haven't worked or have been really the wrong direction to go. I think a big part of being a good human being is admitting when you're wrong and saying, you know what, that didn't work, but we learned from it. Or that didn't work. I mean, City Council is not infallible. We make mistakes. And, just like any other business, if you're running the city like a business, you make mistakes. Fortunately, we have incredibly talented, knowledgeable people on staff backing us, and every once in a while they have to be weighed very carefully, but they say things like, well, I'm pretty sure that you haven't considered that, oh, right, okay, and then you realize, okay, that probably wouldn't have worked. But,
that's awesome.
They save us quite often from ourselves.
Well, we're very lucky to have them. I'm curious as to if there's any role models within this position that you've had the opportunity to learn from or work with, or people who have kind of inspired your decisions in any sort of way. Just because I think that you're in a unique seat when you're acting as city councillor and you're playing this role in our community, and so it'd be interesting to see where you get your inspiration from.
Well, probably I have a couple of role models as far as staff goes. Karen Stanton is, I don't know what her actual, I should have looked up her title, but she deals with a lot of the social issues. She's involved in the homelessness situation. She works with the government to try and bring us funding. She's lobbying for us. She is lovely, respectful. She lifts other women up at City Hall. She's a mentor. She's going to be a Rotary president for the Chilliwack Mount Cheam Rotary Club. If there was still a Woman of the Year, they're not doing it anymore, too bad. But if there was a Woman of the Year, I would nominate her because I think she is incredibly hardworking. She's a mom. She has these wonderful twin boys. She's a family person. She's not too rigid or judgy about other people's beliefs. She's I definitely look up to her. She's younger than I am, so so I look down and then I look up and say, wow, you sort of, when you think of people that you look up to, it's quite often people who have come before you.
Yeah.
But she is, she's amazing. And, probably Carol Marlowe, who works with the Public Art Committee and Parks and Rec, I think she's involved with. She does, a lot of the different facility stuff throughout the city. She does a really good job. And on the side of the guys, Glenn McPherson, who's Public Works, he runs all the crews. He makes all the plans for parks. He's very involved in trails. He is totally a visionary. He's a really great, hardworking guy. He gets his staff out there 24 hours a day when there's an emergency. They all love him because he's so respectful, and he's just a really super great guy and very dedicated. So those would be the ones certainly at City Hall that I probably the respect the most.
That's awesome, because these are the people who are making the plans, developing the community, supporting the people in all of their roles. And those are people we never hear from as community members when we attend like an all candidates meeting. These names never get mentioned. And so we don't get to know the people underneath doing all that hard work. So that's so great.